Quantum physics is not really good at explaining why or how, but it can use the results of the experiment to do things like develop quantum computing or doing grading encryption technology using this information. So using the language of the fundamental laws to try to make sense of organized structures like us, for example, doesn't make a lot of sense. This is my biggest pet peeve in the spiritual community sometimes, that they'll take words describing quantum phenomenon and use them to apply to our life and our interactions. And as far as we can see, that makes no sense. The organized structure of our being somehow filters out these effects. So the fundamental laws express the nature of reality, but it's in conflict with how we see things. And in science, we have to remember there's a hierarchy of knowledge. So when we talk about particles in the quantum level, we're talking about individual particles moving. When we talk about large numbers of particles using something like thermodynamics, we're not looking at individual movements of individual particles, whether they're popping in and out of reality. We're looking at a distribution. And if we look at, basketball bouncing, we're not looking at the movements of individual particles. And so there's a hierarchy of knowledge. And we have to recognize that the way that we describe them with the laws of nature are limited to a particular context. And that was how I started these talks on the first one, that science always has context. So when we speak of quantum physics, we're speaking of the very foundation of what we are, which makes no sense compared to how we observe reality. And this is a bit of the paradox. So rectifying this conflict with human experience is really the work of Zen and maybe science as well. And I would argue the work of the artist. So when you look very deeply into art and into the natural world, you can't help but see overlap. Like this year in January, there were images published from the Juno spacecraft looking at Jupiter from rather close. And I blew one of them up really large on my wall because it looks like Van Gogh or Picasso. It just swirls on Jupiter's surface, but it looks like something from the great masters. There's a scene in the movie Contact, which we talked about. And it's a movie from a book from Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was a great communicator of science. And this was a story about an astronomer who detected signals from alien life. And they sent instructions how to build a machine to take someone through a wormhole to a different part of the universe. And she's in the machine with her headset on and communicating and talking, and things start to sort of go fuzzy and disappear, and everything breaks apart, her technology breaks apart. She keeps repeating back to her control center what she's seeing, the protocol, what she's seeing, and talking, and then she ends up at the end of the wormhole and just vastness in front of her. And the technology that had been surrounding her, that they sort of added to the initial instructions, was gone. And she was just floating in vastness. And when she could speak again, she said, they should have sent a poet. Because the artist, what they do at the highest level is express the inexpressible. And I find that when we get to the deep levels of science, that using words is maybe not the best way. We can do silence, that's Zen too. But the artist can express the experience of these things without contradicting, without breaking the paradox. So that's my version of reality and the unreal.